Just checking in here. Good morning here as we look at what's happening here. Want to update you on a couple of things on what we're expecting here over the next few days here as we let a few more people join. Not only first and foremost, come to me for just a quick second. Weather impact meteorologist Gary Frank here as we talk about what's happening. And I want to point out a couple of things here as I'll check my audio and make sure I'm following along on your Facebook comments here as we look at everything as well. Want to point out first and foremost, I will be following along here so you can hear me. I can hear myself now, so that's good. I want to always check. I will be following along on here. I'm going to go through a whole update on what we can expect, not only today, but tomorrow as well, because we do have a couple of severe threats. A little bit today, not as much because it's hot, and we'll discuss that here shortly. But there is a severe weather threat tomorrow, which could be substantial for some of us. So that's what I want to prepare you for here on this Weather Impact Alert Day. So you'll see at the bottom of your screen, you can text. I've got my laptop over here. You can kind of see maybe a corner of it, yeah, right? So I'll check in if you have text questions. I'll be on there as well, and I'll be following along on Facebook as well. So I'm going to go through this. Maybe you guys are at work or school or hanging out, watching in between. I'll try to answer your questions. But first and foremost, the main story here is the fact that we are hot today, right? This is the hottest day that we've had so far, the entire season. This is the entire year, of course. We will see some isolated storms off to the east. And what I mean by that is the fact that we are going to see a couple of storms pop up along the edge of this eroded cap of warm air, which I'll discuss here shortly. But we also look at very large hail possible. If nothing else, that is the number one thing for us. Very large hail is possible come Friday. Now, these storms will be quick moving and they'll be widely scattered. Not everybody's going to get rain. It really has to do with the position of this warm front, which we've talked about at great length. Now, this cold front is coming through today, and we'll see that here on the big picture. But I want to show you what's happening here at the moment. And as I kind of look at what's happening here, you can see for us, we don't really have much more than clouds. To the north, you have a substantial severe threat actually today. And I also want to outlook where we are in terms of the severe weather threat today. Because look where we are, they're going to be dealing with storms from Green Bay, central Wisconsin into Chicago. So if you have travel plans in and out of an airport, that may delay you today. Now, let's point out where we are in terms of a severe weather threat today and why I don't think that today is as significant and why we don't have a weather impact alert day for today. It doesn't mean that we won't have a severe storm or two, but I don't think that this is our main concern today, and we'll talk about that here. But areas under the slight risk for severe weather include Farmington, Fredericktown, Lesterville, Nashville, Carlisle, Breeze, Salem, Kinmundy, Greenville, and Vandalia. There's a marginal risk in the St. Louis area and points all the way to Chesterfield and around 44. The reason I don't think there's quite a significant risk as much is simply because of this warm layer of air that we have today. We have warm air right now, and temperatures are already almost 80 degrees at this hour, and that's pretty significant here at this point as we're talking about temperatures close to 80 degrees here. But when we're looking at what we're expecting the rest of the day, you're going to continue to look at temperatures that warm up pretty quickly. 86 by noon, we're at 93 by 4 o'clock with a southwest breeze at 15 to 25 miles an hour. But, and when we're talking about records, we're pretty close to a record as well today. And that's another thing that I want to point out before we talk about our severe weather threat. Our records are very, very close to that. 94 is our record today in 1944. We should get to 93 today, like I said. So that would be the second warmest that we've ever had on this 15th of May. Now, when I show you the big picture here, and I pull this back out for just a second on temperature-wise, look at this colder air mass. In fact, it's already moved through on the other side of the state. And I think if I hit spacebar, you can see the wind particles. But regardless, you can tell where the front is. This is this front that's centered pretty much through Independence, maybe through Pittsburgh, Kansas here. It's pretty much starting to work its way through there, but not quite to Grain Valley. And that's kind of where it is. Central Missouri, 76, 78 in St. Louis, right? So this front has moved through. Now, this is not going to be the catalyst for storms for us later today in terms of some widespread line of storms like you would expect sometimes. And the reason for that really has to do with this warm layer of air. And I'll pull this back on a little bit more of a full screen for you, because when we look at advanced tracking, I want to point out we talk about this warm layer of air inhibiting development, and I'll pull this back for myself just a second. When you hear us refer to a warm cap of air, I wanted to look about 5,000 feet above the surface here and watch where this nudge of warm air is right in central Missouri, right over our area. Anytime we see, as you go with height, it's warmer somehow. Not only somehow do we have that inversion, which, as we look at, and I'll show you what it's supposed to be in a second, but normally as we get higher with height, it's supposed to get cooler, right? Well, not this case. We have a warm layer of air that usually holds any vertical development of storms. And so you see those puffy cumulus clouds, but they don't really go any higher, right? And so that's what's in place right now. But look off to our west. Like I said, there's a cold front coming in, and that's going to help erode that cap. And watch as I just go throughout the next several hours, watch how that starts to work its way in. But we still have a pretty good warm layer of air through the Boot Heel all the way through central Indiana. But as that cold front starts to work its way across the state throughout the day, watch how there are some signs that it starts to erode later in the day. And when that happens, that's when storms may pop along that. Now, it's not a guarantee, and that's why, when you see like a slight chance for storms, or some of our models may pop up storms, we talk about this warm layer of air. This is the cap here. And I want to point this out. That's what you hear us refer to as the day heats up, we got those warm updrafts. You see those puffy cumulus clouds. As long as the temperature keeps falling with height, the air will continue to rise. But if the updraft hits that layer of warmer air, it's not going to continue to form larger clouds, right? So you don't see that huge vertical development, and that temperature profile you could really see here. Now, as we look at an uncapped atmosphere, or perhaps where we find a weaker spot here, specifically, that's what we're going to be dealing with here, I think, throughout the day, where, you watch areas like right about here. If you see those little holes where, it's not so uniform like it is on this side, where perhaps it is warm everywhere, if that cold front can erode a couple of spots away, we may see a few storms develop along that, and they're going to tap into this violently humid and hot and unstable air mass and create some pretty big storms. So, and from a standpoint of, well, this seems like a wishy-washy forecast for most of us, I think that 95% of us are going to stay dry today, but I want to prepare for one or two storms, and I'll show you where they are today, when it comes to what we're dealing with today. Because throughout most of the day, the story is the fact that it is hot and it is humid, and look at this particular run of Futurecast. It pops up a couple of storms along that wind shift, and you can see kind of where this wind shift is as I pause this here. Watch where this particular run of Futurecast is popping up some of these storms. This wind shift line, which is this cold front, pushes through. It's right about here, and if we can get that to erode this cap right along here, you'll see a few pop-up showers and storms. Those storms may become severe. They will be able to tap into that atmosphere, and don't be surprised if one or two severe thunderstorm warnings start to come into play. It's not out of the question, and they could really have some big hail, and they may even rotate a little bit. That's what we want to pay attention to. For most of us, I don't think that we're going to be dealing with this. This is probably going to happen more about Salem, Vandalia, Flora, areas to the south. And yes, they're in our viewing area, and perhaps some of you are streaming this on 5 Plus as well, but I think most of this is going to be out of our area. There are some models that don't even show that this exists, right? And that's what we're kind of looking at is, are we going to see that cold front help erode that? And I think for most of us, we're staying dry. But, that warm layer of air probably keeps most of that out of here. And I think that's important to note, because not all models are created equal in figuring these things out. So that's where we are in terms of today, right? So let's get back to this and, talk about this a little bit, right? So we've got past Thursday, right? And that's a day that, I've talked about this as a hot day. There may be one or two very strong storms. There may be nothing. That's the way that today is shaped up. Tomorrow, it's a little bit more uniform. We're not going to see that warm air cap. There's going to be a driving force from a system that rides off the plains and works its way in conjunction with a warm front, which is essentially this cold front that sags south and lifts back to the north as a warm front throughout the day. And that's what we're going to look at from 12 to 6 o'clock tomorrow. Significant severe storms are possible along this cold front. So that's what I want to look at, and I'll put this on a full screen for you here as we try to make sense of this here. As we look at what's going on, here's what we're dealing with here. And I put this, and I can even nudge this warm front a little bit more for Friday afternoon, because I do think that you're going to see this. Let's see if I can get the wind particles on for this. And I think that gives us a little bit better idea. Sometimes it doesn't want to do that for me, but perhaps we don't, and that's okay. But this is where the warm front's going to be, right about here. And you can kind of see it in terms of where this is, where the most significant humidity is, right? It's how far north does this advance? And I pull this back out for me here. Where does this advance? If it advances a little further north, that's where we see the most significant, not only wind that interacts with the southwest wind, which creates the twisting, but also it's the focal point for severe weather development for us for tomorrow. So where does that line up? It depends, right? Some models want it a little further south here, some want it a little further north. I think it's probably going to be where we have this in conjunction right now, where the Storm Prediction Center has outlined several of us on an enhanced risk for severe weather. And as we so often do, we'll explain what that is if you're just following along. And let's see, this is where we are with our severe weather threat on Friday. That includes the city of St. Louis, that includes Arnold, that includes Belleville, that includes Pacific, St. Clair. And I really don't want you to get hung up on the fact that this is right along I-44. I think this is not going to be okay, Wildwood specifically is right on the edge. This is not one of those situations, right? I think the better opportunity is really south of 70 and southeast of 44. So that's where the warm front is probably going to live. And this could be fine-tuned a little bit further east or west either way. But notice how this is a very, very small line in between. If you just look in terms of a mileage standpoint between Rolla and all the way to Jeff City, I mean, if you go from a mileage standpoint, the difference between, slight risk and a marginal risk is only about 37, 40 miles, right? So that really shows you that it is focused on where this front is and where it could be. Now, the main risk, as I've said so often throughout the last 36 to 48 hours, is the fact that we have a higher hail risk. You'll see that is a 30% risk for some pretty large hail. And the hatched area, once again, these black lines that are hatched marks, that's from the Storm Prediction Center. And what that means, it's a greater risk of 2-inch plus hail at any given point in this area within a 25-mile span. So that's what we're looking at in terms of the significant hail. That, to me, is our biggest threat, and it has to do with just the core of the ingredients that for hail, they're very strong for us tomorrow. We also have a tornado risk, and the same token, because of some of these storms, these supercell storms that may develop by themselves. Like I said, you have this warm front that's to the south. You have a strong southwesterly flow, and I do think some of these storms have the capability to rotate. Does that mean all of them will do that? Not necessarily. It really depends on how these storms initially form, their structure, and if they start to merge with each other. I think that's important, and we're going to have to see that. But that's a greater risk for a strong tornado, which is an EF2 or greater tornado. And, just to kind of zoom in to look to see where people are involved in that, that's St. Louis, Arnold, Festus, really the same areas that are under that enhanced risk, right? Most of those spots from Mount Vernon, Nashville, Carlisle, Salem, Kinmundy, Greenville, Highland, St. Rose, Trenton, O'Fallon, Illinois, Columbia, Waterloo, and Hillsborough, DeSoto, Richwood, some spots that have already had some issues for us as well. Festus, Nan's asking about that. Festus is involved in that also. And, when you look at this from a hail size to updraft speed, I mean, you're talking about, I want to show you, we'll talk a little bit about this as well, but let's look at the hail size. I mean, you're talking about the speed, the sheer speed with some of these updrafts are created. And when we get into some of these big hail sizes, you're talking about from golf ball to hen egg to tennis ball and even baseball sized hail. You got updrafts that are going up in these thunderstorms between 65 to 85 miles an hour. It is very significant, and that's how fast those particles are traveling to continue to bounce all those areas all the way up into those 30, 40,000 foot cloud tops to find the cores of hail. And that's what we're dealing with here. Now, in terms of what our hail sizes are, you go from penny to quarter-sized hail. Quarter-size is the baseline one that we show you. That is a severe thunderstorm warning, and then it goes up to $half size hail, golf ball size hail, which is 1 3/4 of an inch, to pool ball. We really don't say that much on TV, and they don't really say that in the Weather Service. But baseball size hail is 2 3/4 inch, and that's where I think our probably maximum hail is going to be tomorrow. That's how big that this hail could be. And then, you get up into the serious hail size, which is softball, and that's 4.5 inches, right? So those are the main things that I want to talk about. Now let's time out what a future radar may look like here. But I want to point out a couple of things, and I'm going to show you a couple of different high resolution models and show you how they may differ and why it's important to pay attention, because I really think between 12 and 6 o'clock, that's our main threat. Let's put our first run of Futurecast on here as we get this here. By noon, here's where the most high resolution model is, the one that we use probably the most frequently. That's not our in-house model, but it's just the high resolution model, and I'll put this on here for you. In fact, I'll put this on with a question so you can see me stream and kind of go things here. By 11 o'clock, we're still dry tomorrow, but as we get into the afternoon, watch where this front is, and you can kind of see where I pointed out to the south, where that front may be, where we go from Rolla to Centerville. But if it gets further to the north, watch how some of these storms still want to develop. And if they start to develop on their own, those are the ones that are big hailers that may rotate as well, right? And I don't think it's going to look exactly like this, and I'll show you a different run here in a second, but I'm just giving you an idea of why there still is some question about what it may look like and how far north that front may lift. Well, I show you this one first here because Farmington, Perryville, Centerville, Fredericktown, Nashville, look at where that front is. And then there are more storms that pop up into the St. Louis area, in Litchfield, in Edwardsville. And then as that front finally pushes through, that's when we finally see our severe threat end. But look at this at 6 o'clock. This is very quick. This is from noon all the way through 1, 2, 3 o'clock. And then that pushes through by the early afternoon and evening hours. That's what we are contending with, right? Let's put a different run. This is what we do here because we can do it on the stream. Let me change from our extended run of the high resolution model to our in-house model. And I'm going to change that here. Let me just look on that. And now let's take a look at this. Because as we get through, this is also a good lesson for what we're dealing with today, right? It has a couple of storms, but not much for us today because of the limited cap that we're involved, right? So as I scan this through Friday morning, we're dry, we're staying dry, but watch that develop. This has it by 11 o'clock. Look at this. This is more of a line, pushes through and kind of falls apart in St. Louis, but is more robust in Farmington, and then picks up again and then pushes out of here, right? And I think overall that's a similar setup to what we're going to expect from a standpoint of the timeline, right? Like this is tomorrow at about 12 o'clock, right? We have storms that are around. This is accelerated a little bit from the last model that I showed you, and these storms aren't kind of by themselves quite as much. But notice how quickly this moves through. 11, 12 o'clock, this is gone. You have these storms that are stronger. You see the more red and even pinks. That's where we could see, depending on where that front is. But as this starts to move into a line, I think we lose as much of the rotation component and turn it into more hail and wind component, at least at that point in the afternoon. This really has everything clear by 4 o'clock, right? So I think that's a little faster than the last one that I just showed you, which is, lasting a little bit longer, or taking a little bit longer to get going in that standpoint, right? So it really may not look exactly like that, but I want us to prepare for a 12 to 6 o'clock window. And it may not look exactly like this on the radar, but that is a good idea of what we can expect here in terms of our severe weather threat. So that's what it looks like from that standpoint as well. Our main threats here at this point seem to be the fact that we have 60 to 70 mile an hour wind, we have up to baseball-sized hail, and a few possible tornadoes. That is a 12 to 6 o'clock timeline. Once again, like I said, this is a 12 to 6 o'clock timeline here. Let me pull up my impact graphic here for you guys. 12 to 6 o'clock, we have the potential for significant severe storms. Once again, let me see if I can go start to answer some of these questions here. Hope I can go to YMCA in the morning for my swimming class. Stephanie asked. I do believe you can. I think it's going to be dry, no problem in the morning. Like I said, this doesn't really get going until about midday, but I want you to be prepared for things to rapidly change by 12 o'clock and on. So like I said, let me get back down to this one here for you. So answered that question for you. Like I said, Kathy asked, do we have a timeline? This is really between 12 and 6, and really depending on where you are, these storms are going to move very quickly. Festus, this is 12 p.m. Kathleen asked, this is 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Friday. So I'm going to continue to loop this for you here. 12 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Friday, like I said. And then what's the timeline for Southern Jeffco? It doesn't seem like it's going to, does it seem like it's going to be more severe? Yeah, I really think Southern Jeffco could be somewhere between 1 and 2 o'clock. And, you know, we all have that potential for some large hail, very large hail, and a tornado or two. St. Peter's is going to be more about 11 or 12 o'clock. If the sun comes out today, will it break the cap and make storms more volatile? Megan, I don't think so. I think it's still very warm. I think the sun's going to come out today and it's going to be warm, no problem. It's more of if the cold front breaks that cap today, and I really don't think that we're going to be dealing with that quite as much today. What do you think for Arnold, Missouri? I think Arnold still has that potential for large hail tomorrow as well. Let's plan between 12 and 2 o'clock for Arnold. So let me ask some of the questions on some of this. Let's see. Let's check in to see if we've got any. Sierra asked, I was wondering what the chance for Belleville to get tornadoes or any severe storms for Friday. And Belleville, you are in that risk for not only large hail, but a tornado or two as well for you tomorrow. So you're in that 10% risk. That is that hatched area with the Storm Prediction Center has the greater risk that is outlined. So that's something that we want to pay close attention to as well. Like I said, I'll leave this up here as I close this out, as most people I've answered most of the Columbia, Illinois timeline. I really think you're closer to about 2 or 3 o'clock, Stephanie. 60 to 70 mile per hour wind, up to baseball-sized hail, significant hail, even a few possible tornadoes. And this is something that we're going to continue to monitor. But like I said, today is a hot day. The possibility of an isolated strong storm isn't out of the question, particularly in the Metro East today. But tomorrow is the main show for this as this front moves further north. We're going to continue to monitor that. I know Scott will be in later on today with an update as we have that. And of course, we'll update you on 5+, and I'll be back for tomorrow morning as well. So that seems to be answering all your questions. I'll leave this on the full screen so we can close this, and we will talk to you very soon.